Hello, everyone, and welcome to another elite episode of the Get Authentic with Marques show. My name is Marques Ogden. Today, I'm joined by my friend, Mr. Craig Caryl of Critical Assets. And you know what? Let's bring him on down. How you doing today, Craig?
Greetings, Marcus. Thanks for having me, buddy.
Look forward to my friend. Craig, first question. What does the word authentic / authenticity mean to Craig?
I think it's studying something down to a DNA level. That's kind of like my MO is any challenge I take on, I try to really get down to the core cellular level of it and understand the problems, the opportunities. That's true when I have an employee that has problems. I'm trying to really understand, what while this may be the cause or this may be effect, what's the cause? Like, what's really going on here? And that's kind of been my secret to success is just getting down to that binary level.
You know what, Craig? I love this because I spoke yesterday in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania for a client, NAFA, National Association of Insurance and Financial Advisors, Pennsylvania chapter. We were chatting about the way to overcome objections or someone's maybe a little more standoffish or having a hardship is curiosity, asking deeper questions, finding out what it is or what is the root of the issue. Because, like you said, every problem stems from some sort of a root of an issue. So, if you're listening, I love what Chris said about being more intentional around asking what is the solution. But again, where did the problem arise or start from in order to be able to solve what's going on with that individual or in business or in his everyday life? So, Craig, tell us a little more about yourself, where you're from, your backstory, and then what you're doing now with critical assets.
Wow, that's a mouthful. I don't know if we have enough time for all that, but I grew up in New York City, the only white kid on my block in Spanish Harlem. So, I learned to be scrappy and creative and also to get along with a lot of different types of people because that was the key to survival. I went west when I was 19 and kind of never looked back. I've been a serial entrepreneur my whole life, not really the kind of guy that likes to work for people. I like to, kind of make my own way. And so I've done a variety of projects. I was in the TV film business for many years, and then I got into some consumer product goods. I launched a big project for Hasbro in the robotic sort of pet world, and then I got into software design, and I like many things, somebody brought me a problem one day, and that problem was a large electrical contractor was working in very technical environments, Raytheon Aerospace, and these companies were not able to really fundamentally understand their mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. There was a couple of guys that understood it. They had the institutional knowledge. Everybody else struggled to get the answers. And so we thought, hey, why don't we create like the Google Maps of this infrastructure? Some very visual, easy tool that anybody could utilize. And that was sort of the beginning of my journey down this path that we know now as critical asset. And ultimately, I designed this tool that has become quite popular at large commercial facilities to kind of salvage that institutional knowledge that guys have, guys that have worked there for 20 years that are like, oh, just tap this machine on the right hand side and the door will pop open. Well, that's tribal knowledge and that takes decades of understanding. And so we take that at all, put it into a digital tool, a very visual digital tool. So you can know nothing about a facility, have access to our software, and you basically have a map of the entire layout, the interconnectivity of everything. If you want to shut down a machine where it's powered from, so
You know what, Craig? This is sensational. As a former contractor that worked in the space of earthwork, utilities, things of that nature, mechanical, electrical, plumbing was around that a lot in different facilities. When I was in Baltimore, I understand this very well. This is a very hard scope to navigate if you're just starting out. Extremely. So, critical asset is really coming in and solving a really huge problem, which I tell people, right, Craig? Great leaders excel at sense making, which is taking difficult, arduous, complex information, breaking it down into simplistic form where people can apply it and can make a difference and a positive change. So, my first question, right? You talked a little bit about, but I want you to dig deeper. What was it that really got you to say, okay, I've heard about this, I've seen this in the industry, and I know there's a problem. How did critical asset become, in your vision, in your mind, the solution that was going to solve this very complex problem?
Look, I think the first challenge was I didn't believe it, right? It just didn't seem possible. Like, how can a company like Raytheon or Aerospace Corporation or any of these companies that can hit a missile at Mach 2 at 20,000 feet, how can they not know how to shut down an air handling unit, right? It just didn't make sense. And so, we talked about authenticity and studying things at a DNA level. That's what I do. That's my process. So I spent about a year and I did about 1,000 interviews of facility managers, building engineers, commercial real estate executives, heads of plumbing, electric, HVAC, to really kind of understand what was their problem, like what was their daily challenge. So, once I established that there really was a fundamental problem, there was a disconnect between this information being available or being held in a few people's heads. Then I was like, well, how do you make something that's very complex very simple? Like, how do you make the iPhone's version of it, the press one button and all will be relieved? And the hardest thing about software is it's not designing it. It's really easy to make it complex. It's really hard to make complex software easy. And, sort of my guiding, my North Star on building something like this is it's got to be learned in under an hour by a 7-year-old, right? And you can juxtapose 7 with a 62-year-old, you know? It's like it has to be that easy that anybody on the spectrum can figure it out, because otherwise you build a piece of software that nobody will use, right? So that's the challenge, and that's kind of, as I said, that's my North Star that I always challenge my software teams, keep it simple, stupid. Like, make it stupid easy and really obvious, and that's the challenge, is to do that. And ultimately that's where success comes, because then everybody wants to use it. You sort of speed up the process, you keep people safer, you avoid accidents, and ultimately you become a hero. But let me tell you, as you know very well, these are hard projects, and that's what kind of that's the food that feeds my soul. Like, I never took the easy road on anything I ever did. Like, the harder it is, the more people are like, this will never work, the bigger smile I have on my face.
Craig, I love this because he's talking about, ladies and gentlemen, having the mindset, the victory mindset to take on challenges and to really use his experience, his wisdom, his team to solve these issues, to solve these problems. And again, ladies, I hope you heard that so well. Keep it simple, right? Keep it simple. The more complex it is, the harder it is for people to digest it. If they can't digest it, they can't apply it. If they can't apply it, then the results or what you're hoping they will gain or sustain over time more than likely will not happen. It won't happen, because what happens if they can't apply it, they can't change the landscape, or they can't do the projects with simplicity and efficiency because they don't understand what's going on. So, Craig, I have a question for you. You mentioned a lot, like commercial real estate, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, HVAC. You mentioned a lot. When you think about critical asset, right, my friend, who is a great target? I call it SCP, strong customer profile. I tell people, the more we can get specific with who we want to do business with, it improves our marketing efficiency that much greater. We're very fortunate, right? We get a lot of downloads to our podcast. I mean, we're averaging right now 10 to 15,000 per day. It's really amazing. So people are going to hear this in a large scale. So I want them to know, who is critical asset real SCP, strong customer profile?
So we look at where are the biggest problems if like the power goes out or the HVAC isn't working. So life sciences, medical facilities, hospitals, medical buildings, laboratories at the very top. Right up there is data centers. Then you look at heavy manufacturing, light manufacturing, right? If your manufacturing line goes down, it could be $100,000 an hour. It could be $1 million an hour. So, where are the table stakes the biggest, right? The least interesting to us is like warehouses, right? Because they're simple, and if the power goes out, nobody cares. So it's power critical environments.
Sure. Yeah, I love this. Ladies and gentlemen, think about this, right? When you think about how Craig came up with the strategy, the ability to grow critical asset, he was always focused on where did he feel the biggest table stake issue would come. And he was always attacking his plan and executing his plan based off that. Craig, I want to get really specific now. I believe there are three critical assets in that regard to build a successful company for critical asset just to be kind of worked out that way. The first critical asset is people. Okay, Craig, people. Talk about the people you've either been surrounding yourself with from your leadership team, from your inner circle to the team you've hired. Because again, right, Craig, you are not, it's more than just you, it's entire team effort. But I tell people when the people around us are top flight, then things can start to move with a much faster pace. Talk about the people that you surround yourself with, you choose to work with, and are helping you continue to elevate critical asset.
Look, it's all about people power at the end of the day because you can't do it all. If you look at my inner circle, you'll see a team of people that have been around me for 10 to 25 years. So I tend to really kind of find people and hold on to them and take them from project to project, even if they're not a perfect fit for that project. That I know their loyalty and their ingenuity is worth trying to back them into this new project and teaching them about it. That's number one. Number two is, when I do hire somebody that I don't know, I spend a lot of time with them. And I don't sit across the table from them asking them stupid resume questions because I know they're going to bullshit their way through that and they've been coached and they've probably done their research. I take them on a long hike or I take them on a scary drive in my car because I'm a New Yorker. So, like yellow means speed up, red means it was kind of orange-ish, it's debatable. I put them in difficult circumstances and watch the meltdown factor. What happens to them? Do they keep their shit together? Are they focused? And I'm just having a conversation about business while I'm terrorizing them on the highway. But you see people in difficult circumstances, how they react. Do they melt down? Are they grabbing onto the thing like freaking out? Okay, that's a person that's not going to survive the trench warfare that is the startup environment. The third thing I would share with you: hire fast, fire faster. Bad people are like cancer. They spread like in hours, the cancer can spread. If somebody's not a fit, whatever the reason, just cut your losses, And the last thing I would share is I look for little leading indicators. I used to not pay attention to little quirky things that somebody did in a series of interviews. Now it's everything to me because I look at those little leading indicators every time I've had a problem with an employee and I thought about it after the fact. I realized they exposed that side of themselves to me. I just chose not to pay attention to it. So now I pay attention to everything.
Ladies and gentlemen, I love what Craig said about people when they're under pressure, when they're under stress, when they're under a very difficult situation. A lot of people will fold or panic or start to act like they don't know what to do or how to fix it. And Craig couldn't be more right. The trench fare of starting in a business, in a new business as a seeding, starting an entrepreneur. If you're not ready for trench war, I'm a former offensive lineman, right, Craig? They call that the trenches, and that's where all the battle and the poking and the punching and the scratching, and all that, the holding, like it all happens in that trench warfare war zone. If you're not strong enough and you're not big enough or bold enough to last, don't even bother stepping on the field. You won't last. Same thing in business. You have to have that dog mentality to keep going when things are stressful, are not going well. Because again, as an entrepreneur, when you start out, I'm gonna tell you right now, it's not gonna go well most of the days. It's just not, because people aren't gonna know who you are. They're not gonna take your phone calls. I mean, it's gonna be hard. I mean, it's gonna be a lot to face. So do you have the mentality, as Craig talked about, to keep going forward and not show stress or not panic or not show that you are now becoming emotional and not having good positive emotion? That's a big difference. What are your thoughts on that, Craig?
So there's a saying that I have, and I give almost everybody that works for me a book. It's called the Book of Positive Quotations, and it's kind of how I think of my life is, glass half full, half empty. I'm obviously a half full person, and I write the same quote in everybody's book, and it basically says, "There are no problems in life, only opportunities to find a more creative solution." So when people run into my office and they're freaking out, and they're like, "We got a problem," I was like, "Get out. I don't have problems in my life." That is the way of thinking, and that really helps you just kind of keep your eye on the prize. And let me tell you, I've had the worst things happen to me, whether it's physical, divorce, financial. Like there's nothing that you could throw on me that hasn't happened to me at some point. Even this company, Critical Asset, like 5 years ago, I got pushed out by my venture capital partners. They were like, they could see green, and they were like, "Hey, let's bring in a professional management company," and they pushed me out, kind of like a Steve Jobs. And I could have totally given up. I could have just been shattered, but I pivoted. I went and I learned all about insurtech, and I started a very very successful insurance carrier, not a brokerage, a carrier called an MGA, and I learned all about insurance. And then the VCs that pushed me out nosedived the company, and I bought it out of bankruptcy for pennies on the dollar. And instead of owning 9% of the company, now I owned 100% of the company. So by focusing and not getting lost in the fact that this terrible thing had happened to me, this injustice, you could say, certainly my perspective, it actually worked out great in the end because I learned this other business and I was able to apply those business principles to Critical Asset. And now, Critical Asset, instead of being a company worth tens of millions of dollars, is on its way to being worth hundreds of millions of dollars because it's got this whole insurance angle where yes, it runs facilities better, but it's actually the ultimate risk mitigation tool. And so insurance carriers are freaking out because now they have this sort of risk profile on all of this infrastructure they've never seen before. I've actually upended a marketplace which could have never happened if I hadn't been pushed out of the company. I would have never owned the percentage I have. It's crazy, but it's all about just stay positive, man. Things happen for a reason. It's like being in the surf. You're upside down, you're in the washing machine, you're running out of breath. It's okay. Like things will work out. Just let it happen. Let yourself get turned in the waves. Eventually, the winter ends and summer comes again.
You know what, ladies and gentlemen? Craig has a phenomenal brand that he made even more extraordinary because he was pushed out. He then took to something else to learn something else. The people that bought it from him tanked it. He bought it back at a much cheaper price. And now he bought the company back with the right people. And now he brings in that insurance piece and he makes the company that much more of a disruptor. And we all know disruptor companies, Amazon, Tesla, Microsoft, Apple, are the companies that become Facebook, that become the major go-to companies. And that's where Critical Asset is on its way to be. And we're so appreciative to have him as a collaborative partner of our show. And I'm going to be talking quick about lots of introduction I can be bringing to him throughout our partnership because he has something that I know a lot of people in the construction world and in the different spaces he plays in could utilize this to what? Help them make things more simple. And that's my next question, Craig. Processes, making systems, processes as simple as possible so people, no matter who is in the room, can follow them, can apply them to make the company so much better. Please talk about how you at Critical Asset create and implement processes, aka systems, to grow and scale the company.
We look at every aspect of everything that everybody's doing all the time. Like there's no wrong answers. We're constantly asking questions, whether it's how somebody comes to the office or how our field teams gather data. And we make sure all our sales guys go into the field and understand every aspect of the process. So when they're sending a bid out, they're speaking from a place of authority. And so we look at everything, every single part of our process. We recently brought our software team in from India for 3 days because we felt like the communication would be better if we could all sit in a room together for 3 days. And during that process, we did two sort of really interesting things. One, just randomly, I had them go get the building engineer from the Hyatt where we were meeting, and I brought the building engineer totally unscripted, and I began to pitch him on our solution, and he sort of scratched his head and he was like, this is genius, we would love this. So now I'm pitching the Hyatt. So in front of the software team, they got to see how, as the CEO, I run the company. Right out of the blue, I found an engineer, I qualified him. The whole thing took 17 minutes, and that turned into a series of meetings. That's number one. Number two, we spent hours working, but we also spent hours playing. So I took the software guy shooting. I made him a barbecue at my house. We went car racing the next day. I do things with my team to create that esprit de corps. And in that process, I'm constantly being inquisitive. What's working, what's not working, how can we make this better, how does the software slate that we built right now works, what if your dashboard was this way, or what if we allowed you to do that, how would that change things? And there's plenty of wrong answers, right? There's plenty of energy you spend in the wrong direction, but ultimately by pushing those boundaries you find the right path. And that's the thing that you have to be asking yourself every day. Am I doing the right thing? Am I acting with integrity? That's a big thing around here. Like I said, when I bought Critical Asset back, I owned the whole pie, right? But what I went and did is I took the old original investors, the small investors, the non-institutionals, and I gave them a big chunk of the company. I gave them 7.5% of the company, not because I had to do it, because I wanted to do it. It felt like the right thing. It felt like it was the right thing to do to stay in integrity. And that's the way I am with my employees. And that's the way I ask them to be with me. If you got a complaint about me, just give it to me. I'm a New Yorker. Oh, we want to get stabbed right in the chest. Let me know how I can be a better boss to you. If you see a process that you think can be improved in my process, let me know.
And that's the last question is promotion. Is as people are doing what they need to do for you and Critical Asset, right, Craig? How do you continue to elevate them up the chain, give them more responsibility to feel like a deeper part of Critical Asset?
Look, I love writing people checks because if I'm writing them checks, it means my stock's going, it's increasing in value. So it actually makes me feel good to reward them. But I also try to do little things because, being emotionally acknowledged and getting a pat on the back means more to most people than just getting a check, right? It's easy to write a check. It's hard to take a moment and take them aside and spend some time and getting into their head and what their experience is like. So I try to reward people in at least two different ways, both financially and making sure I'm connecting with them, and I kind of know what's working for them and what's not, and I let them know I really appreciate you. I appreciate how hard you're working. I see how hard you're working, and I'm grateful for the time and energy and the thoughts and the goodwill that you give me. It's not just a check I write. It's not just an employer-employee relationship. They're part of my family.
I love this. Craig, fantastic interview. How can people get in touch with you if they'd like to know more about critical asset and what you could do for them?
I'm easy to find. You can find me on LinkedIn, Craig Caryl, Caryl, or Craig at criticalasset.com. Or, send a pigeon over here with a little note on its little paw or whatever, talon, and I'll look for the pigeon. So I'm easy to find. I'm, pretty social guy. And I look forward to hearing from you and helping to solve your problems.
I like that. Love. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I will have all that in the show notes. Again, please reach out to Craig Caryl, Critical Asset. Great things on the horizon, fantastic things moving in the right direction. And we want to thank our individuals who are continuing to support our show. We are so grateful for your support. And the authentic tip of this great interview, I'm going to really put in and talk about what Craig said last. If you're leading people, if you have an organization, take time and let your people know how well they are doing and how much they mean to you. It is everything in the business world. People love feeling appreciated, valued, and respected. So please go about doing so in the right way. Again, my name is Marques Ogden. I am the host of the Get Authentic with Marques show. Thanks for tuning in. Have a fantastic day.